What is going on, movie fans? So, a couple weeks ago, I dropped a video ranking all the Friday the 13th movies from the worst to the most enjoyable to watch. And there was a lot of factors that we were using to rank those movies. And that video did really well. And I says, if this video does really well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a few other videos like ranking all the Jasons. So that's what this video is. Let's rank every Jason Voorhees that has been on the screen, and we are ranking from worst all the way up to the best Jason. And I'm looking at a couple different things. I'm looking at how enjoyable the Jason is to watch on camera. How scary is this Jason? How well designed is this Jason? How well acted is this Jason? How intense or scary or intimidating is this Jason in the film? How does he fit into the Friday the 13th canon? So out of the 12 movies, only 11 of them had Jason. We're going to be omitting the 1980 original film, as that was Pamela Voorhees as the killer in that film. But 11 other Jasons are on the chopping block. Pardon the pun. We are also including Part Five's copycat killer. On this list, and that actually will kick off the list as the worst Jason in the 11 films that we'll be ranking is the Jason from Part 5, The New Blood. It was one of, if not the most disappointing and underwhelming third act reveals in all the Friday the 13th films, to just have a exposition of the sheriff explaining to the final girl. I'm blanking on her name. Was it Tammy? Um, in the movie. Oh, that was the paramedic, Roy. Well, take care. It was such a letdown, and it was so confusing as we're watching this movie. Why is Jason's mask different? Like, they were giving a subtle hint to it, but it's like, this, you're not serving the fans. I don't know why they chose to go this route. So at number 11, Part 5, A New Beginning. All right, number 10, Sackhead Jason. As I was watching all of the films, it surprised me how they were able to greenlight so many more Friday the 13th movies with how unfortunate Jason is in his debut. This is the first time we see Jason. Yes, it's Sackhead Jason. And, do I have a problem with the sack? No, it's fine. Like, obviously, we've grown to love the iconic mask. It's fine. That's not the problem. The problem is he is so human in this movie. He is oafish and he makes mistakes. Like, there's a scene where he's trying to hide by staying on a chair and the chair collapses under him. When the final girl Ginny goes after him, he cowers away. He is afraid of her. This is a pretty weak Jason, and it's surprising that we had this Jason and we thought, "Oh, this is good. Let's do like 9 more of these movies." 10 more of these movies, actually. All right, so at number 9, we move into Jason Goes to Hell. Aesthetically, this is a really cool looking Jason. I love how he has become so inflamed and bloated from years of decay, but being underwater, and he looks pus filled, and the mask is starting to seep into his face. It is a really cool looking Jason that we get on screen for just a few minutes. We get him on screen for like a few minutes at the beginning and a few minutes at the end. The rest of the time, it is a spirit kind of body hopping. And the more I think about this film, I had actually ranked it higher on the list of Friday the 13th movies than I ever had anticipated, because as a Friday the 13th movie, I don't like this movie. But as a standalone film, like, if this did not have Jason, if this was a completely secondary demonic character, it would be far more interesting and far more entertaining of a film. But we want to see Jason, and we're not given enough of this Jason. All right, number 8, Freddy vs. Jason. I really did not like the Jason in this movie. He was so goofy and so I'm gonna say lifeless, and you're thinking, "Well, he's not alive." Um, but how he's portrayed is just so secondary. Freddy vs. Jason is a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It is a Freddy film. Freddy's the star of this movie. Jason is such a secondary character used as a plot device to make this a Nightmare on Elm Street film. And as a Freddy movie, it's okay. Yeah, it's an okay Freddy movie, but Jason is just so there's no character to this Jason. The only reason he ranks higher than the others is just because the others were so poorly presented. But this was a pretty bad Jason comparatively. All right, moving on to number 7. We have Jason Takes Manhattan, Part 8. Aesthetically, not a bad design. The reason this ranks lower on the list is a few things. Number one, they had such a superior design in the film that came like, what was it, 1 year right before Part 7, A New Blood. That was such a well designed Jason, if not the best designed Jason. Uh, so why did we go backwards in regards to the quality of the Jason design? Number two, his on-screen kills are so much tamer than they've been. This felt more of um a schlocky comedy horror as opposed to a horror film. Um he didn't feel as intimidating, he didn't feel as menacing. Also, he's wet the entire movie. He's dripping wet the entire movie when theoretically he's only in the water at the very beginning of the movie, right before he climbs onto the ship, and then right before he climbs onto Manhattan by way of Vancouver, I guess. Um, but he's wet the entire movie. You'd think you would dry off after a few hours of walking around a dry boat or walking around a dry city. It's not raining. Why are you still dripping wet as if you just got out of the ocean? That bothered me. Okay, moving on to number 6, we have what I don't know what to call this, hybrid Jason, cyber Jason. It was a cool idea. This is such a gimmicky movie. There is so much I despise about this movie, particularly the use of CGI in the movie where Friday the 13th is built on practical effects and the creativity of the practical effects. I hated the CGI in Jason X, but this is a pretty funny Jason. It was a funny way for them to give the character a completely new visage. And hats off to them for trying and just throwing something against the wall and seeing if it sticks. All right, moving on to number 5 is, in my opinion, the best aesthetic of a Jason we will ever have in a movie. He is the best looking Jason. Um, yeah, the effects, the makeup is Part 7, The New Blood. He looks scarier in this movie than I think in any of the other films. The reason he's not number 1 is he's just not that interesting of a character in this movie. The kill scenes aren't that interesting. The story of the movie itself was pretty controversial and pretty divisive. But how he looks in the aesthetics, this is the best looking Jason. There's a scene where he like stands up on this roadway and the shots from behind him, and you see his entire spine and all of his ribs through the decayed flesh on his back. It looks impeccable. And this movie is what, like almost 30 years old or something like that when it come out, like mid 80s, mid to late 80s. Like the fact that it still holds up in the makeup on Jason, like better than X, better than Freddy vs. Jason. Like this is the best looking Jason. Um, Part 4 or number 4, excuse me. Number 4 is the reboot from 2009. This is a scary Jason. They made him fast. They made him agile. They made him stronger. They made him so aggressively intimidating. This is a terrifying Jason. Well designed, and how they filmed this Jason. I mean, They focused, let's make this a scary Jason. He's intense, really, really brutal in how he handles the teens in the movie. Um, yeah, this was a fun Jason to watch on screen. All right, our top three. Moving on to number three. Hey, we have part three. At number three, he gets his mask in this one. I remember, when I watched this early on, I remember being like, "Oh, there's a lot of downtime in this movie. This movie's not as quickly paced as some of the other Friday the 13th movies." But on rewatching it, this is a very, very intense, very brutal Jason. Part two's Jason was weak sauce. Part three's Jason is the reason we have had so many Friday the 13th movies. This Jason is aggressive. He is strong. He is just such a dominating presence. He is terrifying in this movie. Absolutely love the intensity of part three's Jason. And he gets the iconic hockey mask. Okay, on to the number two. Well, I mean, really, it's between two films at this point, and number two is number six, Jason Lives. You know, I would have thought, and it's so funny because when you think about, if I were to make these lists prior to like watching these movies and paying attention, how different they would be after watching the movies, paying attention, like really making notes and really thinking about this. I would have thought the Jason from Jason 6 would have been so much lower on the list. He's not the scariest looking Jason. I mean, part 7, the effects are so much more intense and dramatic than in part 6. Um, but it's the first time that they were self-aware enough to incorporate just a little bit of humor. And part 6, I think flawlessly really dances the line between horror, and this Jason is the kill scenes in this movie are phenomenal. Between that side of Jason, and we know we're in part 6 right now. We haven't jumped the shark yet, but we know what we are, and we can be aware of it, and we can have a lot of fun with it. I like that. I mean, they had to do something dynamic after the failure of part 5, and they did it perfectly in part 6. The only reason he's not number 1 is the Jason number 1 is just superior in regards to styling and intimidation and scare factor. But this is a fun Jason to watch. And you know, I would say if I were to watch, this movie or the movie I put it at number 1 10 times, I mean, I'd probably put this movie 5 or 6, like, out of 10 times. Like, I would choose it half the time or maybe a little more than half the time. This is such a fun movie to watch and such a fun Jason to watch. And that leads us to number 1, which is the Jason from part 4, The Final Friday. This is, I think, the scariest Jason. This is the most devastating Jason. This is the Jason with, like, the practical effects aren't as good as they are in part 7. I think a lot of that is just time and it just, advances in makeup and practical effects. But they use really good practical effects in this. There are some scenes that are squeamish, and this Jason is aggressive. He is mean. He's as mean as the 2009 remake. There is no schlockiness to this Jason. They were serious when they made this movie, and they wanted this Jason. They took the Jason from part 3, which was so intense and so brutal, and they're like, let's go to 11 on this one. Shout out Spinal Tap. I was so unbelievably blown away upon rewatching because I had seen, when I was younger, I had watched all these movies, and it's so easy to kind of go to, like, the more fun ones that were a little bit later in the series, part 6 specifically, um, and to forget how amazing part 4 was and is. It holds up brilliantly. Uh, Such a great Jason. Such a great Jason. Clear number one winner of the top Jason Voorhees ever to appear on scene. And so the next list I want to do is I actually ranked all the final girls as well. Final girls slash boys, because obviously we had Tommy in 4, 5, and 6. So that's gonna be the next video. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Who is your favorite Jason? Who's your least favorite Jason? Put in the comment section below. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you all in the next screening. Take care, everyone.